Welcome to Chatting the Pictures. My name is Cara Finnegan, and I'm a writer, teacher, and historian of photography.
And I'm Michael Shaw. I'm a writer, a psychologist, and also a publisher of Reading the Pictures.
For all the attention the Canadian truckers' protest received, the photos were a mashup of messages and symbols.
This photo was taken by Spencer Platt for Getty Images on February 9, 2022. It shows long-haul trucks blocking the streets of downtown Ottawa as part of a protest against COVID-19 vaccine mandates for drivers crossing the U.S.-Canadian border. The occupation, dubbed the Freedom Convoy and cheered on by American far-right groups, paralyzed Canada's capital for almost 3 weeks.
This photo, you're drawn, of course, first to the gas cans. They're in the foreground of the image. They're bright red. And, the police did not want people to be bringing things like fuel and other support to the protesters. And so one of the things that started happening was that people began to resist that order by bringing empty gas cans or gas cans filled with water to the protest. So this was kind of a way to create confusion and subterfuge, right? So the police had to deal with people that they saw carrying gas cans, even if the cans didn't, in fact, contain gas. One of the things that played out in the context of the protest was the gas cans became a literal mode of resistance, but they are also, especially for me in this image, a real symbol of what is happening in the context of these events as well. I think we can view the protests as, throwing fuel on a fringe right-wing movement in Canada, a movement that many people say is actually quite small. The truckers were not supported by most Canadians, and something like 90% of Canadian truckers are in fact vaccinated. But the movement and the symbolic element of many things in the protest, but especially the gas cans, really animated those conversations on the right wing.
It's funny how random right-wing iconography is. What's going on in this photograph with those cans in the foreground? Are those like the four horsemen of the political apocalypse? It seems more indicative of visual noise and nonsense and anarchy, which is kind of the point, right? It's like this disruption of symbolism. And then when you start looking at other elements of the photograph, the signage on those massive trucks is literally about noise. Almost all the signs refer to the right to blare air horns. And what happened was a court banned the use of the horns early on for the ear-splitting noise. Many bystanders, for example, called it psychological warfare. So that's what most of the narrative here is about, is like, don't take away our freedom to make noise.
That kind of hyper masculinity, right, of the big bad trucks is softened in a really interesting way by the presence of stuffed animals affixed to the fronts of the trucks. On the left, there are what look like stuffed animal puppies in the truck on the right. And, one of the interesting things about the protests was the presence of families, and particularly the presence of children. So like many resistance movements, actually, on both sides, children became a way to kind of make sure that the police wouldn't move in the way that they might move in, for example, if it were a protest of only adults. The other thing I want to call attention to is really the Canadian nationalism that's playing out here. People dressed in the maple leaf, people carrying the maple leaf, putting it on their trucks. The truck in the middle is quoting directly from the Canadian national anthem, God Keep Our Land Glorious and Free. So there's this really hyper-nationalistic narrative that's playing out across the protests, and that's really evident in this image. And, you can sort of see why that would be attractive to not only right-wing Canadians, but also other people, particularly in the United States. 63% of donations to a GoFundMe that was set up to support truckers came from the United States. So this is a narrative that, even though it is Canadian nationalism, it's a broader nationalist narrative that is playing out.
The way that flags are appropriated and repurposed in the name of nationalism is really strange. And you can really tell that, particularly looking at domestic imagery, looking at photos here in the United States, where whoever saw that many pictures of the maple leaf ever, when all of a sudden this now becomes a new extension of Make America Great Again.